Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the newest episode of the Theater Enthusiast podcast. I am very honored to welcome our next guest. I told them prior to this I've wanted to have them on for a while, so I'm really happy that it's finally happening. They are an award-winning playwright and Tony-nominated playwright, also a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. They are a novelist, a screenwriter, a producer, a musician. Anything else you want to add?
No, no, nothing else, no more. Yeah,
Okay, great. Adam Rapp is here.
thank
Thank
you.
you so much for. Oh,
Thank you for having me. Thanks for having me. I was going to say I'm also a dog owner, dog
and a
lover.
dog owner. We can add that. And a dog owner, a proud dog owner. What type of dog do you have?
He's a mix. He's an interesting mix. He's a Australian cattle dog that was bred with a Siberian Husky, and he looks like a wolf. And when I first fostered him, that's what I was told was that he was half wolf, and he's really incredible. But he was kind of wild, and I've had to learn how to live with a wild creature. But he's getting domesticated, and he's very sweet, and he's
Yeah.
on my floor right now.
Is that kind of where the wolf comes into some of your writings, like your latest novel with the
No, no, it's
title?
just purely, completely. That's all just completely random, honestly. Like when he came into my life, and my friend was fostering him, I had had a dog for 17 years, and I was like, I can't do that again because I can't go through that loss again. I
Yeah.
just, and then I met him, and immediately someone was like, "You should meet this dog. He's so cool. He's this amazing, dog that got kind of dumped." And I went and met him, and immediately I was like, I have to leave with him. It was just a complete random thing.
Yeah.
So I'm the lucky one.
Yeah. Well, listen, sometimes you just know when you meet the dog, right? So, you were born in Chicago but grew up in Illinois. So I'm curious to know what got you interested in writing?
You know, um, I didn't have any interest in writing. I had no idea that I had any interest in writing until I was in college. It was my sophomore year. I went to college on a basketball scholarship to a small school in Dubuque, Iowa called Clark College, was now called Clark University. And I had an eye injury, and I had to drop classes because I couldn't read for a while. I had a basketball injury that
Mm.
forced me to I was supposed to kind of quit school, but I didn't want to quit school because I wanted to continue getting credits. And I got redshirted that year, which is where you take a year off and heal from an injury, and then they give you an extra year at the end. So I had a fifth year. But when I took the year off, I had to figure out like classes that I could take in which I could not have to read so much. And ironically, where I was going to the registrar's office was there was a displaced poetry class next door, and it was playing a bunch of sitar music. And I
Hmm.
just heard the music, and I popped my head in, and the guy was like, "Come in and join us." And it was like 13 people around a table with a boombox playing Ravi Shankar sitar music. And I just had no idea what I was walking into. And it was an automatic writing exercise, and there were yellow legal pads everywhere and pencils. And he gave me a legal pad and a pencil, and he said the only rule is just you can't stop moving your pencil.
Mm.
So I guess it's an exercise dedicated to sort of unlocking the unconscious in some way. And he said to me very quickly, he said, you can draw pictures, you can do hieroglyphics, you can write words, but you just can't stop moving your pencil. And it was for 20 minutes. And at the end of that, I was like, oh, I'm going to take this class because ironically, it was like I didn't have to read. I had an eye patch because my eye was healing.
Oh, wow.
I had been punctured from a stupid injury. And so I couldn't read heavily. But for whatever reason, I didn't think that that would keep me from writing, and it kind of didn't. But that moment, I was like, I'm going to try to go to this class. And the first of I t so I picked up that class, and I picked up a fiction class just because I thought, again, I won't have to read so much. And then I just was like immediately smitten. Like the thing of like connecting to my imagination and writing sentences and words was something I think was probably innate in me, and I didn't know it was there. And then I just it was like falling in love or like becoming obsessed with something that I kind of knew in the moment it was going to be something that would seize me for the rest of my life. And I think that sounds a little silly and when I say it out loud, but that's truly what it felt like. And I was like, oh, my life is changing
Yeah.
immediately. And that's then I started reading, with one eye. I wasn't an avid reader. I wasn't
Mhm.
interested in film or the arts. I was just a jock. And
Yeah.
so that was really strange and kind of hugely transformational for me. And I was 19.
Wow.
So,
Do you remember what, like, after your first writing assignment with the, not stop writing, was there a particular thing that you worked on that they critiqued in class that you were just like, oh, this is just, I'm loving this. I'm like in this moment of this one
yeah,
particular.
I mean, actually, in that poetry class, so what we would do is we would do an automatic writing exercise, and then you would share anything you felt comfortable with, like
Mhm.
at the end of the exercise. And he would call on 3 or 4 people to share out loud. And I circled like half a paragraph of a bunch of nonsense that kind of came out like it was sort of like Dr. Seuss meets, you know, I don't know, some kind of crazy, grotesque um, poetry, and I shared it and I was like, whoa. And I didn't realize that I had like a fondness for like the musicality of language or the absurdity of how unrelated nouns and adjectives could sound. And I was tickled by that. And I was like, oh, I love this
Mhm.
task to, make language mean something, have something meaningful or exciting happen just from the sound of it or even the way it sounds in your head.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that was really exciting. And so that I became obsessed with writers who were kind of really linguistically exciting, like Michael Ondaatje or um, Updike's early books, like Rabbit Run was
Mhm.
a huge influence on me in terms of, his language and his character and the way his sentences sounded to me.
Mhm.
And I was very late to reading, so I was discovering all these novelists and poets. I was discovering them like when at 19, 20, when most people were discovering them 15, 16, 17. And so I felt like it was like a real young discovery. So it was like, again, it was like an adolescent kind of love.
Mhm. Well,
Uh,
if it makes you feel any better, I knew of Sondheim, but I know you're not a huge musical theater person. But when I was in college, because I went to school for acting, um, I knew Rodgers and Hammerstein better, so I got my Sondheim education in college. So it's different, but I understand where you're coming from, and it's so interesting. I mean, as a playwright, and with playwrights, I always talk about language, but in preparation for this chat that we were having, I went back and I looked at The Sound Inside. And there was a line that Christopher has where he just added a like into what he was saying. And I just thought that was it's like the theater nerd in me was like, oh, it's so brilliant. He just put that word like in there because that's how people talk. I know that I say like all the time. So with the language, yeah, I just wanted to shout
Thank
that
you.
out.
That's nice to
Yeah.
hear that. Yeah, I'm so I don't know, I think language for especially for young people,
Hmm.
having lived in New York since 1991, and I used to go to this gym 3, 4 times a week to play ball during their like invited lunch open run. And, there were kids in there who were like 18, 17. There were like 30-year-olds, 20-year-olds. I've been going there since I was 23. But there was always this like really cool kind of chorus of language you would hear because it was like white dudes and old guys and young kids and non-white
Hmm.
kids and
Yeah.
kids dropped out of school and kids. It was just like this crazy cacophony of language. And I was just I would marvel at like the way the younger kids especially had their own government of language where
Yeah.
there was new slang every week and there was like
Still to
remember
this day.
yeah, totally. And it's like
Yeah.
what makes the English language so fascinating to me is how it transforms before words are sort of edicted into official um, etymological, dictionaries and stuff. Like I remember kids were talking about one kid liked another kid's sneakers and he said they were crisp. And I was like, oh, that immediately went into the novel I was writing. I was like,
Yeah.
I just was so happy to be in that gym all the time because I just heard this incredible um, vocabulary of like new slang that was constantly coming out of that world, which was a gym.
Yeah.
Uh, that's
I mean,
part of the,
I
that's part of being here.
Yeah, I'm working with younger people with one of my part-time jobs, and I've heard the word slay a lot. I've heard the word period a lot. So those are like the two new slang terms, and I have
Period meaning
like
in,
period, yes, like
uh-huh, okay,
yeah, and then
like a testimonial in some way.
yeah,
Yeah,
and then oh, slay,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
slay. And I have a younger sister who's 19, and I said to her, "Do people your age still use these words?" And she's like, I have no idea. She's too busy with college. But
Right.
so I'm curious to know, you moved to New York and you saw your brother in 6 Degrees of Separation, and that's kind of what started you with toying around the idea of writing a play. I would love to know how you ended up going to Juilliard for a 2-year fellowship.
Yeah, so the playwriting thing,
Mhm.
I was very excited by 6 Degrees. I'd seen other plays and
Mhm.
especially a lot of musicals that I didn't really understand or were above me or over my head or
Mhm.
next to my brain. I don't know what to say there, but and then it wasn't until I came to New York and I saw like off Broadway stuff where
Mhm.
like there was real like it's like straight for the lack of a better term, straight plays,
Yeah.
And my brother was doing 6 Degrees and I saw that a couple of times because I had nothing else to do at night. And I was like, I'll come back and see it again. And I was able to like sit in the stage manager's booth and see it for free a couple times. And I just was so blown away by Guare and his like the indictment in the play and the way the play is presented to the audience. It's a broken fourth wall play that invites a kind of real conversation with the audience, like acknowledges the audience. And it felt like a political event in some ways. And I don't mean political in terms of like social politics, but just like the witnessing of something that was unfolding before you and then sort of forcing you to reckon with it and have an opinion. And I just thought that was incredibly exciting. And I was like, wow, I want to try to do that.
Mhm.
Uh, and then, you know, that was really a real gateway.
Mhm.
And I just bought a bunch of plays after that at St. Mark's Bookstore, the one that used to be on St. Mark's Place before it moved a couple times. And I just wanted to kind of figure out how to write based on reading plays, and that was really my entry point. Now, in terms of Juilliard, it's a strange story because it sounds a little um, apocryphal, but it's not. I was at the O'Neill Playwrights Conference in 1996, and there was a great writer named Kira Oblinsky who had gone through the Juilliard program. We were both there the same year. I had a play called Ghosts in the Cottonwoods, and she had a play called Herculina. And she, I believe, from what I understand, she gave Marcia Norman and Chris Durang a copy of my play. I didn't even know what Juilliard was. I didn't even know it was a conservatory arts program. I didn't know anything about it. Um, and I got a call like months later from, I guess this would have been later than that. This would have been like 1998 or 9. I got a call from Joe Kramer, who was running the Juilliard program, and he was like, "Hey, we would love you to come talk to Marcia." And I was like, "For what?" I didn't even apply. This is a strange part of it.
Mhm.
But obviously, Kira had given them my a couple of my plays because I'd been to the O'Neill 2 years in a row and
Yeah.
just starting to understand what that world was. And anyway, I went to go meet Marcia. She had to reschedule, and I went a second time. She had to reschedule again, and then I was very um, obnoxious, and I was like, "Well, I'm not coming up to Lincoln Center again. That's like going to Connecticut, because I
Yeah.
was living in this village and it was like a 45-minute subway ride.
Yeah, it's a journey.
Yeah, and so I was like, well, she had to reschedule twice because she had stuff going on with her family, her son and her daughter, and as I was frustratedly leaving, Joe Kramer called me in his office, who was running the program as the administrator, and he was like, "They want to give you a spot here," and I was like, "I don't even know what you're talking." I was like, "What are you talking about?" Still, I didn't know, and he was like, "It's a fellowship program, and it's 2 years, and you get a little money," and I was like, "I don't know, give it to somebody else. I think I'm tired of." I was having been to the O'Neill twice and not have something come of those plays
Yeah.
was really, really disheartening for me. And I was like, you should probably give this slot to somebody else. And then he said, we give health insurance. And I was like, ding, ding, ding. I'd been suffering from a bad back.
Yeah.
I would eventually have back surgery in 2006, but at that time, this is like 1999. I was like playing in all these basketball tournaments and I was still trying to get like tryouts and pro tryouts and stuff. And I was
Didn't you
really
get close to getting onto an NBA team, or am I just like
I
making
was
that?
invited. I worked out with the Detroit Pistons, and I was invited to their veterans camp back in 1999. And then that's shortly after that. And I didn't make it, but they really liked me, and I did well. And I was already too old anyway. I was in my late 20s, and they thought I was much younger because I looked a lot younger. And and then literally 3 months later in New York, at a big run that I was playing with this team I collapsed in the middle of the court and my back would never be the same until I had surgery. So
Yeah.
it was like, it wasn't gonna, even if I would have played my butt off and got on miraculously made that team, I think I would have been probably months away from, having the same thing happen because I just played too much for too long and I wasn't taking care of it in the way that you need to when you're playing that much.
Yeah.
My disc got really bad and I had to get it fixed. So I eventually did, but because my back was in such bad shape, the Juilliard thing, I cynically accepted and was like, okay, I'll just get their health insurance. And then during the process of being in class with Chris Durang and Marcia and the other writers, I just completely fell in love with, the actors there, the the collaboration that was like afforded us, and just I kind of got. And then my first play was done while I was there. It was ART offered to do my play Nocturne. That wasn't my first play. It was like my ninth play. But
Yeah.
I've been writing for a couple of years at that point, and I was writing a lot. And Bob Brustein, who ran ART, Marcia had given him my play. Marcia Norman had given Bob Brustein my play,
Mhm.
and he called me and said he was going to do it. So if I hadn't gone to Juilliard and accepted, and I was so stupid for being so obnoxious about it, but if I wouldn't have gone there, then nothing else would have happened because Marcia's the one who gave him Nocturne. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what started, like kind of launched my career, my early career,
Yeah.
to a meaningful way.
Yeah. So I'd love to talk about Blackbird for a moment, and I'm curious to know how and why the decision was made to turn that specific play of yours into a movie.
It wasn't my decision. I was approached by a guy named Bruce Romans, who was a Los Angeles actor and producer who had Louisville connections to this guy who was doing it what they didn't even call it at the time, but like micro budget indie films.
Hmm.
And he was like, "Would you want to do this?" And I was like, "Sure, I'll adapt it and direct it." And I had directed one film already, but
Yeah.
I wanted to do another one, and so it just came out of opportunity. I never saw it in my early conception of it. I never saw it as a filmic experience because it's all set in one room and
Hmm.
it's on one night and it's very intimate. It's just two people in a room.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting to kind of adapt it and open it up and figure out what New York was for them outside of that room. And I backed it up and told the story that we learn on stage anyway. I try to back it up and tell it cinematically. So it was the first time I was adapting anything of mine for another medium. It
Yeah.
was and it was really a powerful experience, especially to work with Paul on it, who had done the play in London, had done it here, and then was able to do the film. And then um, to work with him and Mike Shannon, who had done the film in Pittsburgh. I'm sorry, the play in Pittsburgh, and he and Paul are now like best friends. But it was just cool to work with both of them,
Mhm.
and he played another part. And then I had all these great theater actors who I'd been working with, all these Dee O'Connell, and I mean, so many Danny Hock and all these people were in it who just sort of agreed to work for nothing. Stephen Gerges is in it really briefly.
Yeah.
Dennis Roberts is in it, Danny Master Giorgio. Just a bunch of great theater people who I'd come up with all kind of were cool to work for nothing. And I had a great DP, and I learned a tremendous amount about filmmaking, even though we had like one camera and we just didn't have much in terms of toys or
Mhm.
technical stuff, but just in terms of like coverage and how you tell a story on film that was sort of my big lesson in filmmaking in some ways, that in the first film. But it was just honestly somebody called me and said, would you be interested in doing this? It wasn't something that I had in my brain to do until that happened, but I tried to make the most of it.
Yeah, I would love to shout out Paul Sparks quickly because in my research review, you talk about really loving the theater experience where it's just the actors and the words. And I feel like recently, did you see Grangeville that he was
Oh,
in?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
perfect example of that.
Yeah, Paul's like he's a true
Yeah,
veteran of the theater. He's like all about that. He's all about live experience. He's all about being alive on stage. I mean, he is such an incredible artist, and I've been lucky to work with him. I don't know how many times, honestly. I think more than 15. I
wow.
mean, and so many plays, so many workshops, so many, a film. And he's one of my best friends, like a brother. We were in a band together. I mean, it's like we go way, way, way
Do
back.
you
Yeah.
have, are you performing anymore? Because I haven't really like seen anything of that. Because you say
Yeah, no,
sometimes
no.
musician.
Yeah, I mean, I was for sure, and I still play music in my room, but I don't, no, we're not active. I
Yeah,
think everybody just got really busy, and when you get busy and you get married and you have kids and you have mortgages, suddenly a band becomes
yeah,
a task and I think we had an opportunity to be a bigger band, and we couldn't because people had career stuff that was turning better for them, and Paul being one of them, and Michael Chernus, obviously has a big career now, and uh, these guys went to school to be great actors, and we were like doing this thing that boys do. I think being in a band is much. It's like the greatest gift of. It's like playing baseball and being in a band are like the greatest gift to boys in some ways, and to girls too. But like
yeah.
we were like in our 30s, and we were acting like we're 16, and it was such a glorious act of kind of just like defying adulthood in some way.
Yeah.
It was like this extended adolescence, and then we had to all grow up.
Listen, you could still do it. Michael Shannon's out there
Oh, I
doing
know.
stuff. He was
Michael's
on the
amazing.
Tonight Show talking about it.
Michael's an amazing, amazing musician
Yeah.
and songwriter, and he was doing that when he was like 15. I mean, this guy, Mike. Nobody knows this, but Michael, his first instrument is the cello.
Oh, wow. Weirdly, I could see that.
He's a classically trained cellist,
Wow.
and he's a great singer.
Yeah.
I think
So
he's
I
out
would,
doing Michael Stipe songs now with his band.
yeah. So I'd love to talk about the Eugene O'Neill Center for a minute because they actually just announced yesterday that you're going to, hold on, I have it written down. You're going to be doing their fall development program, and you also just did their summer program as well. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that for those listening who are interested in playwriting?
Yeah, the O'Neill Playwrights Conference it's one of the great legacy um, theater playwriting festival conferences ever. Like Lloyd Richards started it in I think '66, and every great playwright, American playwright, has gone through it, from Wendy Wasserstein to Sam Shepard to David Lindsay Abaire to I mean everyone, and everyone has been. You look at the plaques that are in their little cafeteria area and it has everybody listed on them that's been there, and it's just like an incredible um, list of all the great writers, who came up, or not just in New York, but around the country. So it was my first year there was 1996, and I was a very naive, inexperienced playwright. I got in, I think they only accepted like 11 people. It was a play called Ghosts in the Cottonwoods, which I would direct actually many years later, in New York. And I was there with Lee Blessing, and Jeffrey Hatcher was there, and a bunch of playwrights who didn't wind up having big careers, but we just all bonded, and it was like the greatest summer camp of my life, and it was where you're taught that the playwright for new work is like the center of the experience. And I don't mean like center in terms of ego, but just like the idea has to come out of somebody or some brain, and you feel like as the playwright that you are the center of how things change, how things um, are animated, how things are staged. Like every idea starts with that, which is the play and the words and the stage directions. And it was a huge seminal experience for me. So I finished that summer, and then I immediately wrote a new play just to try to get into the O'Neill again, because that was sort of the most hopeful thing to do at the time. And I wrote another play and got in the next summer. And that was like, again, an amazing summer. Hilary Bell was there. I worked with Israel Hicks, who's no longer with us. He directed my play. There's just, it was just like, it's like hallowed ground, And I know it's where an NTI also exists, and they have a musical theater conference and a puppetry conference. But for me, it was like this portal opened up in my life, and I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, I want to be, I was still going to write fiction because I'll never stop doing that. But
You
it
can
was,
shout out the book that was just released last year if you would like. Wolf at the
oh,
Table.
it's called Wolf at the Table. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's a novel, and it's actually doing really well in France, which is really funny. And not
Oh, good.
funny, great. It's doing really well in France and Italy, and it did really well here, but
Mhm.
it's doing particularly well there. It must be a really good translation.
Mhm.
Uh, but yeah, the O'Neill Playwrights Conference, and I think any playwright who's been there, I would say the majority of them would say it's one of the most special places you can go as a playwright. They do 5 days of rehearsal, and there's different versions of how it's worked out. And I know Amelia Ben-Susan, who's running it now, does it slightly differently than it used to be. It's now like actors sitting in chairs with music stands and some very minimal staging. It used to be fully staged, actors holding scripts, using their own wardrobe from their suitcases, and lights and sound. Now there's lights and sound a little bit, and actors are sitting in chairs with music stands, but there's been all kinds of versions of that across the years and the decades. But I'd been 2 summers in a row, and then I went back again in 2000 when Jim Houghton was there with Finer Noble Gases, and then I was asked to go back in residence a couple times. So I think this summer was my seventh summer there, and
Yeah.
I was in residence, and I wrote a new play that's going to be uh, shared a bit at the Guggenheim. I
Yeah.
think on
The Night Fawn on October 26th at 7 p.m. Tickets
yeah.
available online.
Yeah, and I had been thinking about that play for a long time, and I knew I was going to get like 3.5 weeks at
Is
the
that
O'Neill.
the one with the cornfield?
Um,
Don't you have a
no,
play that you were writing with the cornfield?
this has a lot of corn in it and a lot of corn
Okay.
in it. There's a major cornfield that this kid has to run through
In
to
this play?
kind of save his own life. Yeah,
Okay.
and then there's another play that I wrote that's the new group is going to do called Jackals that has a cornfield in it as well, which
Okay.
mostly speaks to my Midwestern background probably, but the Night Fawn, which is going to be done at the Guggenheim Sunday thing, um, I wrote it this summer at the O'Neill, and it was just incredible to be back there. And they weren't rehearsing another one of my. I was like the only writer there who was strictly there in residence to write,
Hmm.
and the other four writers there were, um, they were going through a week-long process, and there were two readings,
Hmm.
and but it was just so special to be back there at the stage in my career and to be back. at a place that started my career,
Yeah.
it was just really, really special. And, there's fog there and there's like there's a beautiful, there's this, the sound. It feels like, I don't know, there's just a magic to that place and the air. And you walk around the grounds there and you can kind of feel the legacy of, August Wilson. Every summer that he was there, when they were developing one of his plays, he would take the director, Bill Partland, who was from Minnesota, and he would sit down across from at a table at Blue Jeans, which is the little pub there, and he would start to like orate what his next play was going to be,
Hmm.
almost like he was reading an essay. And you hear these stories about how everyone works differently,
Yeah.
whether it's August Wilson or I remember I walked into the library one summer when I was there in residence, and David Lindsay Bear was there working on a play. I think it was Fuddy Mears he was working on. And I walked into the library and he was alone in this little library that's at the top of the mansion. It's this like little attic garret library. It's really cool. And there's just one big long table there. And he was at the table and he was writing and he was like laughing out loud. And I was like, "What are you working on?" He was like, "Oh, I'm writing my play." And I was like, "Oh man." Like I was watching him amuse himself by his own, because he's so fu funny, like,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Oh, people actually he can be, it was so charming to see this genius laughing at his own work. It was just really cool. So you get to see how everyone does their thing, or you hear, you know, from the August Wilson story to, I played so many hours of wiffle ball with Lee Blessing and like Dallas Roberts and Paul Sparks, not at the O'Neill, but like the legacy of wiffle ball that started at the O'Neill, like transferred to other places. Where I was at a summer with Paul Sparks where I met him in Wheeling, West Virginia at the Contemporary American Theater Festival, and we played wiffle ball there because a bunch of us had been playing it at the O'Neill with Lee Blessing. So there's this weird wiffle ball thing that started at
Yeah.
the O'Neill too in the Sunken Garden, and now I don't know. It's just this really special place where I think a lot of people fell in love there. A lot of people, left their marriages there. A lot of people made deep connections that never stopped. Skip Mercier, who is no longer with us, was kind of the resident set designer there.
Hmm.
And I think at one point he almost became the artistic director, but he became like a close friend, even though we never worked together. But I would go to his house and row eight and with him and his partner, and we'd have dinner and we would just talk about, shoot the shit, or we would just talk about people from the O'Neill or plays, and it's some of the greatest people I've ever met in my life I met there. So that's kind of, it just means a lot to me. That place is really special. I think it means a lot to a lot of people.
Yeah. So with the last couple of minutes we have left, I would love to talk about The Outsiders. I feel like it kind of has a Broadway cult following, kind of how my generation had Spring Awakening. This generation now has The Outsiders. And you've mentioned you're not really a musical theater person, so I'm curious to know how this was brought to you and how it came into your life.
Yeah, so somebody from the Iraka group um, called me and said, would you be, they called my agent and said, would Adam be interested in talking about adapting The Outsiders as a musical? And I was like, that's crazy. Like I just, how is, it's such an intimate 15, 14-year-old boy's voice from a novel. Like that's a really interesting idea. I don't know how anyone would do it, but and they sent me two songs from Jamestown Revival, who wound up writing the music with Justin Levine. And the two songs were a song that never made the cut of the musical called Money Something in a Gun. I can't remember, Money, a Train and a Gun or something like that.
Mhm.
And then Stay Gold, which is the kind of 11th hour number in the show that exists. And it exists. When I heard that demo of Stay Gold, it literally brought me to tears. And I was like, how did that even happen? Like, I hadn't thought about the book, and I read it when I was 15.
Yeah.
I'd seen the movie years before, but I hadn't thought about the work at all. And so I just was like really intrigued by how powerful and how emotional the song was. I found out that these guys never even really had seen any theater, that they're just these dudes from Austin who were great songwriters. I started listening to their music and I was like, yeah, of course I'd love to. If they're writing stuff like this, I should definitely
Yeah.
take them in. So I went in and spoke to Matthew Rigo, who's kind of he and his brother and Hank Unger run the Rocker group. And Matthew and I sat down and just sort of talked. And I came in kind of pitching an idea about what the world of the play was and how I saw it and how I just, when I do that, because I'm a director and I think about like an audience's experience and I think about how you walk into the space and I think about what it should feel like and the tone. And so I had that kind of all, and I just kind of let it out. I just told them what I thought it would be.
Hmm.
And I think that was intriguing to them, but I think what really spoke to them more was the fact that my background and how I grew up and where I grew up and probably felt more um, analogous and parallel to like Pony Boy and Johnny and the Curtis brothers' life. Because, I was raised by a single mom. She was a nurse. We lived in Joliet, Illinois, which is at the time was a really tough place. And we grew up in an apartment complex and we were, there weren't many white families in that complex. And there was a lot of poverty and some crime and it was like scrappy, right? And I think when he saw that part of me, I think he figured that was a good emotional connecting point to the play.
Hmm.
I don't even know how much of my work they knew. I don't even know, especially my work as a director, I don't know how much of I think they probably read me and I'm sure that they had maybe been to a play or two.
Yeah.
I think it was more about like somehow my history that made it feel important to them, to connect me to it. So the next step was I met with John and Zach, who are John O'Neill and Zach Bearden, who are the brains the brains behind Jamestown. And I just love those dudes, and having been in a band for many years and understanding what that world is, and they really like came out of nothing. They just started writing music together since they were like seventh graders, and they had been like kind of a wannabe boy band at one point to being like almost like a doo-wop duo.
Wow.
They discovered like this kind of country Americana thing that they were doing, which became Jamestown, which is really undeniably powerful. And I just thought they were great. And when I met with them, I was like, we should make something. We should do something with this. So that's kind of where it came from. And then, other people got involved and Justin Levine got involved. And at one point, there was a director attached who had to kind of leave later, kind of during the pandemic. She made a choice to kind of take a different route away from us. And then Danya got involved. And I was pretty instrumental in that because I'd seen some of her work that I really loved. And I'd just seen, um, I'd just seen her play on Broadway that was brought right after the pandemic. And I just was so blown away by it.
Yeah.
Um, and we met afterwards, and we had been both directing stuff at the Flea years before and had been around each other. In fact, we shared the same space for these three plays that were done in the same space, or two plays, I think.
Hmm.
Hers and mine. One I directed was mine, called Wolf in the River, and hers was I can't remember the name of it, but it was she was great, and I was like, why don't I knew we were looking for a new director, and so I just sort of felt her out about over lunch about like would she I took her temperature about would she be interested in like considering doing a musical, and she was, and
Yeah.
then she met John and Zach and Justin, and we all just like kind of fell in love with each other and figured out a way to go forward. And she had to do like 19 interviews, and there were some really great people that it was a tough decision, but we're all so lucky and happy that she did it because she killed it.
Yeah. Well, the rest is theater history. Won a bunch of Tonys. You
Yeah,
were
I mean, look,
nominated.
none of us knew that that was going to happen. I knew that what I was setting out to do, what I said to the Rocker Group in my first meeting was like, this play has to be as brutal as it is beautiful. It has to be as difficult as it is tender, like because that's what adolescence is. And there are two big deaths in the play, and one is incredibly tragic, and the other one is a suicide, you
Yeah.
know, and that happens in our lives, and that happens to teenagers. And I know one of Danya's closest friends when she was 14, like killed himself, and it forever changed her life. And I know we've all been through that. We've all been around it. But S.E. Hinton was not dabbling in like small matters. I mean, she was asking huge questions about class and about our time on Earth, and what it means to be poor, what it means to be rich, what it means to be without a parent, chosen family, all that stuff. So my way into this was like, this is not going to be at times easy to watch. Hopefully, the music feels earned, and I think it does. I think the reason why these kids sing is solved for this musical, and I think it has to give kind of salve to the brutality in the play, because
Yeah.
I don't think you can't, the extremes have to both be firing, right? I feel like the brutality has to be brutal. So when you watch the fights or you watch the blood happening, um, you hope for um, the heart in it too, and I think that's what works. And I think a lot of that credit goes to Danya and the tone that she was able to strike, and also the songs are just, I think the songs are so stunning, even the ones that didn't make it, some of them are really, really cool.
Yeah. We do have about 1 minute left,
Right.
unfortunately. I can sit here and listen to you talk for hours. So please come back on anytime you would like to.
Happy to.
Yeah. But with that being said, is there anything else you wanted to add before we end?
Um, I just think we're in a time, I mean, just speaking directly about the theater, I have two projects coming. I'm not trying to plug projects because that's just not my style, but
Adam, you can do whatever you want on this
oh, no,
podcast.
I
Plug,
don't.
don't plug, what have you.
So lucky that I'm looking forward to doing next season, and I've been hungry to do a new play for a long time.
Mhm.
But I think like the place we're in right now in New York, especially, probably around the country too, is just, I think, because money has shrunk so much, that the non-for-profit world has gotten kind of scared, and we've had to do fewer things, and so we're more careful about what we're selecting. And I just feel like in some ways the opposite has to happen. We have to be more bold than ever. We have to be doing crazier things than ever, and like fear is not the way. Fear and half stepping is not the way to like address what's going on in terms of you know our our rosters of new plays shrinking. I
Mhm.
think we need to be artists need to form companies again and make work
Yeah.
at all costs. I think that's really important. And I keep thinking about that and how the artist-led companies of the 60s and 70s, whether it was Judith Molina or Steppenwolf or 13P comes to mind, like that's what's got to happen again, because we can't wait for moneyed people to let go of the purse strings and fund us. We have to just make work and get into buildings and make work. I think that's, I just saw uh, I saw a great play in Brooklyn written by my friend Michael Chernis was in it with Quincy Tyler Bernstein and um, Emily Davis and all these great actors. And it was a bunch of amazing theater actors working for no money at a church in Brooklyn. And it was Bubba Weiler's play. And I can't remember the name of it. It's like, well, I guess I'll go on or something like that.
Mhm.
And it was really inspiring because it was like all these people who you normally see at the Roundabout or, at the Vineyard or at New York Theater Workshop or, these great legacy theaters that have been so good to the new plays world, like they just don't have the money right now. And
Yeah.
so what happened was this guy who directed it, he and his company was just like, we're just going to make this happen. We're going to make this happen. We're going to do it in a church. And everyone came and saw it, and that was really inspiring.
Yeah.
Um, I'm forgetting the guy's name. He's a great young director. He did Grangeville. He directed Grangeville that
Oh,
Paul
yeah,
was in.
yeah, yeah.
I'm just forgetting his name. I don't know why I can't think of his name.
It's eluding me as well, but yeah.
Anyway, but that was what I'm saying is that to me was inspiring because it was about a few people got together and said, this is important to do, so let's make it happen. And it wasn't like waiting to be chosen. It wasn't waiting for a moneyed institution to choose you. It was just like people had to do it. And I think that's what has to happen again.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And I very much agree. I could totally theater nerd out so much harder with you, but unfortunately, we do have to.
Jack Serio, that's who directed it.
There we
Yeah,
go. We got it in before we ended. Well, thank you everyone for listening. If you are interested in seeing Adam's Night, The Work in Progress, Eugene O'Neill Theater Center, Night Fawn by Adam Rapp. Sorry, I wrote the whole title down so people know. It's going to be at the Guggenheim on October 26th, and afterwards you're going to be in discussion as well. So thank you all for listening.
great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.